that was
Wow,
one of
I
the
would never
things.
expect that.
I know I wouldn't have spent I see, that was gonna be one where before medical school, I would have said, "Yeah, definitely not, like, absolutely not, I'm not doing that." And I distinctly remember kind of, like, watching the screen kind of come up, the CT scan, and the resident turns to me and goes, "We gotta take that out. So, you can either leave now but if you stay, you have to help." And I'm like, "Well, I'm definitely gonna stay." And all of a sudden, I'm in there, and I get handed the drill, and I get to drill a burr hole, my first burr hole ever.
Hello, and welcome to the Med School Years podcast. I'm Dina.
And I'm Carlos, where we talk about everything you need to know about the medical school journey and residency.
We've both worked closely with applicants, advisors, and schools to understand the ins and outs of what it takes to get into med school. And now we're going beyond the admissions process.
And don't worry, this podcast isn't just about the boring stuff. We're also going to give you a behind the scenes look at the life of medical school students and residents.
We know that medical school can be overwhelming, but we're here to break it all down for you with expert tips, insider advice, and stories from people and students who've been there.
So whether you're starting the exploration process or just curious about what it takes to becoming a future physician, we got you covered.
Sit back, relax, and welcome to the Med School Years podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Med School Years podcast. I'm Dina, and here with my teammate for my podcast, Carlos. Today, very exciting, we are interviewing the soon-to-be Dr. McBriar, Josh, who's completing M4 at Zucker School of Medicine and entering his neurosurgery residency at Lenox Hill Hospital. We are super excited to talk to you today. Welcome. We're going to grill you with questions because this is a competitive specialty. We're dying to know some details.
Great, I'm excited.
Good. So let's talk a little bit just about Lenox Hill, right? No big deal. They took 3 neurosurgery residents, if I'm correct. Pretty good placement, I would say. Very popular neurosurgery department, ranked one of the best in the world for neurosurgery. Famous on Netflix, probably one of my famous Netflix shows.
Yeah.
There was a Netflix show for people watching who don't know. It was a documentary on Lenox Hill Neurosurgery. Not sure if you were there for any of the recordings. You'll have to tell us that. But how did you make this happen?
Yeah, I mean, so, I think when I was in college really is when I started kind of learning about the brain, learning about all the different pathways and things like that. And that's when I first got interested in neurology and surgery, really. I went and I shadowed a couple times and things like that. But then when I first got to medical school, that was when I really started thinking, hey, you know what? This is for me. Basically, kind of within my first month of medical school, we had a meet and greet at the school with the neurosurgery department. And we basically exchanged numbers. One of the residents was like, hey, you should come and shadow overnight one night. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So I came in and, this was like my first time being in a hospital and I didn't even have like scrub access. So the resident had to get me scrubs. They're way too small. I'm like walking around, like ripping them. Basically, I like went into one case. I wasn't really sure what was going on, but I just knew it was really cool. And then a trauma came in actually. Someone had been, an elderly lady had been, kind of found down and she had this big subdural in her head. And I distinctly remember kind of like watching the screen kind of come up, the CT scan, and the resident turns to me and goes, we got to take that out. So you can either leave now but if you stay, you have to help. And I'm like, well, I'm definitely going to stay. So we bring the patient up to the OR and I remember, learning how to set up everything in the room, just kind of like just being thrown everywhere. Right. And, I learned how to scrub in. I learned, what my glove sizes are, things that I hadn't thought about. And all of a sudden I'm in there and I get handed the drill and I get to drill a burr hole, my first burr hole ever.
Wow.
Ever since then, I haven't looked back. I mean, we finished that case. We brought the patient up to the ICU and they woke up. And, that feeling of seeing the patient at, maybe one of their worst moments in their life, helping them get through that, however small, my small ability at the time to help them through that. And also their family, I mean, seeing the impact that we just made on not just the patient, but everyone who touches that patient, everyone who's around them. And so that, when times get tough, when things get difficult, I think back about that. And I think back like, that's what first made me say, okay, I'm going to do whatever it takes to do this. I'm going to do whatever it takes to become a neurosurgeon because that's what I want to do. And after that, it really starts with, I think, connections, reaching out to people. We have a great program director, Dr. Michael Scholder. I basically cold emailed him and I said, "Hey, I want to be a neurosurgeon. How can I do this?" And so he met with me. I went into his office maybe once a week for a long time when I was a first year and second year medical student, just kind of constant talking about, what can I do for research? What can I do for clinical stuff? Things like that. And after a while, you start to get to know the department really well. You start to come to some of the things and, you meet all the residents. You try and meet as many of the faculty as possible. And then really when you're a fourth year med student in that first month, really, you do your home your home sub internship rotation. That's when I think and I think that's, when I was really able to shine. You're with the neurosurgery department every single day. You're in cases every single day. You're there early, you're there late. You're kind of showing that you got what it takes to kind of do the work, put the work in. You get questions on imaging, patient care, things like that, kind of show your clinical acumen. And then also your social skills. I mean, that's something that's important, or you're going to be with some of these residents for 7 years. Do they want to hang out with you? Do they like you? Are you, normal enough that you can have a conversation with them? And so that really, I think, was what really propelled me. And then, you go on interviews and you make your rank list and you just hope.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that you sort of shared a little bit of the journey that you've taken, right, to decide this is the specialty, making the connections. But looking back on your application and preparation for residency, right, you knew you wanted to go neurosurgery. You're fortunate enough that you have a program there that you can make connections. But what are some of the things that maybe you were concerned about just the entire process, right? Like you were making connections, that's one part, but you had to submit other things. What are some of those concerns that you think were always running in the back of your mind of like, oh, I have to remember to do this, I have to remember that, oh, I have to do that, I have to show myself in this way. Can you talk a little bit
Absolutely.
about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great question, honestly. Kind of the first thing that was always on my mind was research, right? I didn't do a ton of research in my undergrad, and so I didn't have a lot coming in. But you look up some of the statistics on how many, research items and papers you need to apply for neurosurgery residency specifically, but a lot of the other hyper competitive ones as well. And it's in the 20s, and you're like, well, so I have none.
It's
So
actually 30, it was actually 37.8, I
oh
think,
my
this
god,
year.
more now.
Yeah.
Oh boy. So
Yeah.
and kind of when you're a first year med student, it's like, okay, I want to do research, but I don't really know anyone. I'm not sure how to get involved. And I think that was my first big hurdle is to figure out, I want to do all these things, but how do I do them? How do I get involved? And so that was definitely one of the things that backed my mind. And talking with other people who've applied and people who are going to be applying next year,
Mhm.
that's what everyone thinks about, right? It's all about the numbers. And unfortunately, it's a bit of a rat race, I mean, you
Mhm.
kind of take what you can get. You try and do as many things as you can, and sometimes things work out, sometimes things don't work out, unfortunately. But that was definitely it. So making sure that I did as much research as I could was definitely always at the back of my mind, even when studying for other things. And then I'd say, another thing would be I felt like my grades were very important. I mean, the first 2 years were pass fail, but then once you get into clinicals, it's a little bit more, and each school does it a little bit differently, but it's a little bit more up to chance, right? Because you have your clinical grades, which are based off of the faculty and residents you interact with. So, for instance, when you're on internal medicine, it's the hospitalists and it's the IM residents that are there, and they give you evaluations. And so, depending on your interactions with them, whether or not they give you honors, high
Mhm.
pass, that really matters. It's not completely in your control, or at least I felt like it wasn't completely in my control all the time because, I felt like, well, I can study for the shelf exams, which are like the multiple
Mhm.
choice exams we take at the end of each block. I can study for those. I feel like that's at least in my control. But with the evaluations, it's a little bit like, well, like what if this person just doesn't like me? What, who knows? And I've known some people who've gotten, unfortunately gotten some lower marks on that, not because they weren't good medical students, it's just because they just didn't get along with their residents. So I think that was also something that really worried me because, you kind of hear this voice in the background, like you have to be perfect. You have to get perfect grades. You
Mhm.
have to, do a ton of
Yeah.
research, great step scores. You're always kind of thinking about that. And it's very stressful. It's very stressful.
You bring up such a good point, Josh, that being human throughout this whole process
Yeah.
is important. Being able to talk to people. I remember back in admissions reading applications, and there are a lot of really smart people out there applying to
Yeah.
med school, right? With high metrics. And sometimes I would read applications and say, well, it seems like this person's just been locked in a library for 4 years. Do they even know how to engage,
Right.
right? And talk to people and collaborate.
Mhm.
You had been an athlete in undergrad, right? So just talk to me a little bit about how important it is to balance, all of the studying and the research and the
Mhm.
academic side of being a medical student with having a little bit of fun and learning how to collaborate and talk to people so that when you get to those stages where you're getting evaluated on your clinicals, you do appear human.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you bring up some great points. I mean, it's easy to kind of think, okay, I'm in medical school. I need to study all the time. I need to do this, 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 and this. You're so focused on studying and research that you just forget, like you said, how to be human. You forget, oh, like maybe I should go work out. Maybe I should go for that run. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do that. I should read a book, something like that. Something that I think is really important to keep in mind is that the human aspect of it is a part of the application. When you think about it that way, it's like, yeah, like you need to take care of yourself. You need to make sure that, your interactions with other people, you're not too closed off. You're not only able to talk about, neurosurgery, for example, right? I mean, it's one of those things where if I were to only talk about neurosurgery the entire time during interviews or, during my rotations, that would kind of come off as a little weird. It's like, well, can this guy talk about anything else? Do they have interests? One of the interview questions that, they always ask, they're like, what hobbies do you have? Right. And I know a lot of people who struggle with that. And it's when you're locked in that mindset of, I need to study, I need to study, I need to study. It's like, well, I don't have any hobbies. I just study. But it's really important to be able to take a step back and dedicate time for things, other things that you like to do, and spending time with friends and family. That's so important because it's really easy just to think, I have so much work I need to do. I just can't. I can't go to dinner tonight. I can't go out this weekend with my friends because I just have too much to do. There's definitely a balance. There definitely needs to be a balance, but one of the things that I like to do is me and my friends will play there's intramural flag football that Hofstra has with the undergrads, and so we can join it as medical students. So each year we've done it, and every Wednesday night we go out there and we have fun.
That's
We
fun.
play football, and it's great time. No matter how tired I am, no matter how much I need to study, I feel like I can do that. I think overall, really, it's just making time, forcing yourself to make time for friends and family, and realizing that that's part of your application. It's not just studying and research.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for sharing that. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think sometimes medical students lose themselves in the chaos of being a medical student, right? It's like, I'm a medical student, I need to perform and be at the top of my game. But you bring a good subject to the forefront in my mind, specifically about finding this balance, right? Again, neurosurgery, any competitive specialty. I think you right away get into this game mode of like, I have to be a super competitive in order to be
Right.
successful. Can you talk a little bit of what are the things that you did? I would say planned as much as you could, right, through the 3.5 years to make sure that you remained on top of everything,
Mhm.
but also found that balance, right? Because again, you're proof that you can do it. But how did you balance it? How did you plan out knowing that you had school, life, all these other
Mhm.
things that you wanted to do?
Right, yeah. I mean, so what I found very helpful is I made myself kind of like a weekly schedule. Basically, what I did is I just planned in, okay, I'm going to the gym this day. Like I'm going to the gym, every other day, 4 days a week, whatever. I'm like, that's a non-negotiable. I'm doing that. I have to do that. And then I would also put a little bit of studying every day. That's what I found was the most helpful. In college, it was one of those things where I felt like it was a little bit easier to kind of cram, right before. But if you do a little bit every day, and maybe it's a little bit cliche to say, I feel like everyone always says that, but I found it was so helpful. So say we had 3 lectures one day, I would make sure that by the end of the week, I had reviewed all the lectures at least once and just kind of caught up on all of them. And I know that some people would do Anki decks, things like that. I never really got into that. I felt like for me, it was better to kind of review the PowerPoints. And this is kind of in the first 2 years, the first preclinical years. And then when I was a third year medical student, what I started doing was on rotations where I didn't have to be there super early, I would go to the gym in the morning. It was very challenging to do, but that at least kept me honest because I felt like, okay, if I'm going to do one thing today, I'm going to go to the gym.
Yeah.
And then maybe I'll be tired all day, but at least I was able to get to the gym because I knew that I was not going to go after. I was, once it's 4 p.m. and the residents let you go, there's no way I was going to the gym. I basically tried to kind of find ways to force myself to do things like that. Each Friday, if there were some friends who like had some free time, I'd go into the city, we'd go have dinner, things like that. At least try for something like that.
I want to ask you a question about the curriculum at Zucker. It's unique in that in M1, the first thing that you do, and correct me if I'm wrong, is EMT training.
Yep. Hmm.
So talk to me about that, because to me that is a little different, right? And then correspondingly, I remember when you started med school, you had said to me what surprised you about your class at Zucker were how many people came from really competitive schools. And I think that we work with so many students coming, you went to an Ivy League institution for undergrad. We work with so many students coming out of those schools that had this mentality. I have to go to an Ivy League medical school, have to go to a Columbia and a Harvard and Yale. You really don't. It's what you make of the experience, right? Yeah. So just talk to me a little bit about the curriculum and how you feel you were prepared to handle it and what it was like to be in that mix of competitive students that you didn't expect to be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, kind of starting off with EMT was interesting. The kind of the first couple of things you do is you go on these 12-hour ambulance ride-alongs basically. And you don't really know anything, but you're learning alongside with the paramedics and there are I had some really interesting experiences. And kind of my first time really being in more of an acute clinical setting where you're responding to cases and things like that. And then it kind of makes you think and it makes you wonder about things. And because, you bring the patient to the emergency room and then you leave them there and you're like, well, what happened with that patient? What was the next step there? What was kind of the next thing? And when you're a first year med student, you don't really think about it too much because you don't really know. But what I found was that having those couple cases kind of burned into my memory about me wondering what's going on and what's happening. I was then able to fill in the gaps throughout my first 2 years, I would say, of medical school. Those cases grounded me into being like, okay, like I see what heart failure looks like, even though I didn't know what that was at the time. Now I can kind of put two and two together. And so now when I'm learning about heart failure, that's what I think about. I think about the one patient that I saw. Things like that, I think, are really helpful and kind of, hit the ground running a little bit, but it's fun and it's exhilarating. And, for me, I mean, I want to do a pretty high acuity specialty, right? And so I think that's something that I learned quickly was that I liked that. Now I have other friends who, didn't necessarily like it as much. And I think it kind of taught them that, hey, maybe they don't want to do such a high acuity specialty. Maybe that's not something they want to do. And I do find that helpful is kind of knowing that about yourself, which you wouldn't really be able to find out any other way. Otherwise, in terms of the curriculum, we do a lot of small group experiences, a lot of stuff like that. And a good amount of kind of self-directed learning. I would say it was interesting because yeah, I mean, there were so many people from so many great institutions and it's fun having such small group experiences with people who are so intelligent, right? Because you can have these conversations and there are things that you didn't think about and things that, maybe you think about it this way and you think about it a different way and stuff like that. And it was really helpful to me in terms of just learning, discovering topics that maybe I didn't have as great of a grasp on. I would say kind of overall, in terms of picking a medical school, right? Because, it's right. I mean, you're from an Ivy League institution, you want to go to one of these high powered institutions. To me, what matters more is really the health system, I think and kind of based on what you want to do as well. If I mean, a lot of people don't know the health system for me, kind of as we touched on a little bit before, that our neurosurgery department is so strong that I felt like I had such a good base and I had such good mentorship. For me, I mean, I wouldn't be here without them. Now it's different because there's a lot of institutions that don't have a neurosurgery department, for example. And so, I wouldn't have been as successful if I went to one of those institutions. That's really what I've kind of taken away from my experience is when choosing a medical school, it's really more about the health system and really it is what you make of it, kind of like you said.
Yeah.
The opportunities are there. You just have to go for it. And if you can do it, you're going to stand out, at the end of the day. So yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to stay on topic of curriculum, right? You talked about small groups,
Mhm.
self-directed learning. You have big milestone exams that you need to do.
Yeah.
What was your strategy knowing that a lot of it was small group self-directed? Like, how did you manage and think about, I have to pass step one, then I have to take step two, be as competitive?
Right.
Like, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think, each of our small groups, basically what we do is we go through cases. And so, we take about 2 hours and we kind of talk through a case. We talk through learning objectives of the case. And we actually have these rooms that are like whiteboards all the way around. So we can kind of go up, draw pathways, kind of get into the biochem of things and stuff like that. And I found that pretty helpful. In terms of studying for those exams, though, I do think that it's very separate from that, right? Because it's a different
Mhm.
thought process. It's less of a thought process of it's less really interrogating the information and really thinking about it as opposed to multiple choice questions. For me, what was so helpful with that is double AMC practice tests, the MBME practice tests, and UWorld. UWorld was basically my go-to. I tried to make myself a bit of a schedule to study for step one, but at the same time, with step one being pass fail, I also wanted to make sure I took it a little bit early so that I had some time to kind of relax before my third year of medical school. Because I believe we had the month of April and the month of May to kind of study and take step one. And I ended up taking step one 3 weeks into April. So I got the rest of the time off, which was super nice, just to kind of chill out before third year.
So dedicated study time, what do you think? What did you dedicate? What, 4 weeks maybe?
Yeah, I think it was 3 weeks total. And
3 weeks.
basically, what I did is I took a practice exam kind of like in the beginning of the spring to kind of see where I was at. And I did okay. I did okay on it. So then what I did is I basically went through and I just religiously did UWorld questions, do
Okay.
40 blocks of UWorld questions. And I just did as many as I possibly could. I reviewed them. And when I was reviewing them, that was really when I felt like I was learning the most because they have these really nice explanations and they have these really nice kind of why this answer choice was wrong kind of a thing. That I found really helpful to kind of condense everything I'd learned over the past 2 years into this multiple choice format where I could just kind of fly through these questions. Then, I took it and I ended up passing. And then for step two, that was a little bit different. I do find that, step two, because there's a little more on the table there, right? Because it's not pass fail. You need to get a good score. That being said, the third year curriculum, I think, lends itself to multiple choice a little bit better
Okay.
because you use UWorld throughout your clerkship blocks. So you use that to study for your shelf exams, which are the multiple choice ones. So then by the time you get to your dedicated time for studying, which is about a month for step two, you kind of had a better base, I felt like, than for step one. And then I reset UWorld and I just tried to do the entire thing over again. And I basically just tried to plan it out. So I think I did about 120 UWorld questions every day. I tried to make sure I was healthy. I went to the gym. I tried to eat well. I tried to see friends and family, things like that. Because I think that's also kind of a thing that can happen is if, you're studying and you kind of lose yourself, but it felt good. And then, I did really well. So
And for those who don't know, you still have one more, three.
yes. Yeah. One more. But I think that's pass fail as well.
Okay, awesome.
One more.
One more.
And then you're on your way. I'm going to circle back a little bit to research for a minute. You mentioned you didn't have a lot of research undergrad. I try to get across to students all the time that even if you don't have a lot of research entering med school, you're going to need to do some research in med school.
Yeah.
So looking at some stats from Lenox Hill Neurosurgery, I mean, Dr. Bugvar, who's there, right?
hmm
Does the most investigative clinical trials than any other neurosurgeon in the country. They have 34 clinical, this is all on their website, by the way.
Yeah.
34 clinical trials, 21 interventional trials related to chemotherapy to the brain. Insane amount of trials and a lot of investigation going on. And you're on a lot of publications as well. You did a lot of research in that department. Talk to me about how important it was to know how to investigate and have those scientific inquiry skills and how important the research was planning for your residency.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, research is one of those things where it's a trickle down effect. So, like the attending will have an idea and that idea will get funneled to the residents, and then the residents will get funneled to junior residents, and then that'll get funneled to medical students. Your ability to help is kind of evaluated, right? And so when I was a first year med student, I didn't really have all the skills that I needed. I couldn't really do statistics. I wasn't really sure how to write things. I wasn't really sure how to come up with good questions. And so I had to learn that. And fortunately, a lot of the residents were able to kind of teach us, and me and a couple other medical students kind of teach us, okay, this is what what we want. This is how we want you to go through the charts. This is how we want you to get the data. This is how we want you to put in the Excel sheet, things like that. As I've gone along, I've kind of been able to pick up those things and realize that, the amount of research I'm able to do is proportional to how competent I am at it. If I didn't know how to do any of this stuff and if I didn't bother to learn, then I wouldn't be able to do any research because, no one's just going to put you on a paper just to put you on a paper. You have to really demonstrate that you know how to do these things and that you want to do these things. And it's so important. And even just, any field of medicine, it's evidence-based practice. So not only do you have to, know the textbook topics, but you also have to know the research. You have to know what the evidence is behind, different therapies and different efficacies and things like that. And I find that significantly easier when I know how to do the research and when I can evaluate a paper based off the methods. And I can say, okay, well, this paper is very solid. I understand what's going on. I understand why they came to the conclusions they did. And this is great evidence. Or papers that, you know what? Okay, I see what they're trying to say, but I don't totally buy this evidence as, something that would necessarily change practice. I think it's possible to get to that level of understanding without doing research potentially, but it makes it so much easier when you understand what's going on, when you've done it yourself. I've submitted a lot of papers to, a lot of different journals. And I think that that's something that I'm kind of constantly learning is through revisions that get sent back to you. It's like, oh, I didn't think about that. That's something I should think about. And then you kind of bank it for the next time you submit a paper. It's so important. It's so important, not just for applications, but for being a physician in the future. Being able to tailor your practice to evidence-based medicine is imperative, I would say.
It's going to be a big part of your life as a neurosurgeon.
Yeah,
Sure. Research is never going away for you.
No.
Yeah. So you were doing research in neurosurgery. At the same time, I would imagine you were doing research on programs, right?
Yeah.
Because you had to cast a wide net. Can you talk a little bit of maybe, since you're already matched and you know where you're going, number of programs selected, maybe a little bit of your strategy and looking at different neurosurgery programs, geographic areas. I know that there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes in terms of you maybe declaring geographic in your applications, program signaling, if you participated in that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this year, there were, for neurosurgery, you got 25 signals that you could basically, spend on different programs. What I ended up doing is I think I ended up applying to 39 programs and, I used all my 25 signals. I didn't put a geographic preference, kind of, and this is based off kind of talking with residents and talking with my program director about kind of what the best strategy was, right? Because, you're right. You got to cast a wide net. You got to try and get as many interviews as you can because you just don't know. I was able to signal programs kind of all around the country. I felt pretty comfortable going wherever I felt like I had the best opportunity, wherever I liked the best. So, I signaled places in California. I signaled places in Florida. I signaled places in Tennessee, up in Boston, things like that. And I felt like for me, what I wanted to look at is partially the number of residents that are there. Kind of my current program now, and that's what I've seen throughout the years in medical school. I liked that there were a lot of residents there. I liked kind of the environment that they had. I like they're all friends with each other, which is really nice. They all love each other. So that's something that I liked, and that's something I was looking for. So that's kind of partially what I based it on. I also based it on the case volume. That's something that when looking at residency programs, I want to be able to see tons of things. I'm not completely sure what specific facet of neurosurgery I'd like to do yet. And so I wanted to get experience doing everything. I wanted to experience spine, cerebrovascular, tumor, all the good stuff. And so that's kind of something that I looked at as well. Additionally, I felt like I did want to be attached to an institution that had a big kind of presence in the area, right? Somewhere where you're not necessarily fighting for cases and, very, very well respected, which is most of the institutions.
So 39 programs, 25 signals. How many interviews did you end up yielding out of that whole process?
So I ended up going to 11 interviews. There were a couple that I wasn't able to make, which I think, because now they're in person. It used to be that you could kind of do so many interviews, you really didn't have any issues kind of scheduling them because they were just all on Zoom. And it still is that way for other specialties, like for internal medicine. It's still all virtual. But for neurosurgery, it's all in person and it's all basically 2-day kind of things. You come in the night before, you get dinner with the residents at a restaurant, and then you do the interview the next day. I found that was a bit challenging to schedule because it's like, okay, well, can I fly directly from an interview to a dinner I did do that a couple times, and it was pretty exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, neurosurgery programs, you need to go back to virtual. It's a lot easier on medical students.
I
It's
liked it.
cost effective. Right. There's its benefits. And I think one of the big things that was a topic was the cost of
Right.
having
Oh,
to
yeah. Oh,
fly,
yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, when you did it as an admissions person way back when, before COVID, it was like
Mhm.
you were going across the country to all of these interviews for admission. And
Mhm.
then you're like, I'm done. And then you would surprise, just kidding, you come to medical school and you had to do it again. And
Mhm.
now it's making its trend back. So,
Right.
but good for you. I mean, 11 interviews and 30, 25 signals. I mean, that's great return.
Yeah, yeah. And I will say, I think being in person, it's one of those things where I think I liked it a lot better than being
Mhm.
virtually because getting to
You're
know the area,
personable.
like getting to know the area, kind of meeting
Yeah.
the residents, like meeting people face to face, I really loved it. And I felt like I got a better feel for it because it's like, okay, if I'm going to spend 7 years of my life here, I want to at least be here for a little bit, at least to visit, kind
Yeah.
of a thing. So I think it helps me make my rank list really well.
Was there any specialty you were exposed to? I mean, you knew early on you wanted to go into
Right.
neurosurgery, right? But was there anything that you were exposed to in med school that you're like, hell no, right? Like, because I'm looking like the match list for for Zucker is amazing.
It really was.
Like 21 different specialties, 24 matched at Northwell, 4 neurosurgery matches, which is that's a high number.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
a lot, so it seems like everybody, and I'm noticing like very, very little family medicine. It's an intense list, like high
Yeah.
acuity list, right? But
yeah.
at any point was there like a time where you couldn't do this?
I don't know if it's like you kinda get into the mindset of being in the clerkship, right? Because it's very clear when someone comes into a clerkship and they obviously don't like it and they don't wanna be
Mm,
there, and it's just like, ugh, I feel like everyone can tell, and so I really tried my best to not think like that, and even if it was something that I didn't necessarily think I wanted to do or didn't like, I tried to find what I liked about it. And so and I tried my best. I mean, there were certainly days where I was like, I really do not want to go in. But and maybe I guess I was successful in convincing myself there's something interesting about each specialty. There really is.
Mhm.
And even though maybe it's not as high acuity as I would like, maybe it's not surgery. I mean, I love being in the OR. I still was able to find things that I found really interesting. Things that I would look up on my own because I was like, oh, I want to know how this works. So I don't think there was one specialty that I was like, oh, never, 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 never. But, I think I'm too much of an OR junkie to do anything out of the OR. So
So if there wasn't a never, was there ever a if not neurosurgery, this would be my next choice? What
so
was that?
yeah, actually I had a really good OBGYN rotation. I That was
wow,
one of
I
the
would never
things.
expect that.
I know I wouldn't have spent I see that was gonna be one where before medical school I would have said, yeah, definitely not. Like absolutely not. I'm
Hmm,
not doing that. But then
awesome.
you go to the rotation, so it's known as, especially at our school, as the hardest rotation in all of third year. And so I was kind of expecting it to be difficult. It's one of those ones where you stay from 6 to 6. They don't let you go early ever. Most of the time they keep you late. It is what it is, being a medical student. But I was able to do so many things. And I think that's why I loved it. I was able to deliver babies. I was able to deliver 3 babies, like, by
Okay.
myself.
Mm,
I mean, that was just an amazing experience. I got to deliver placentas, I got to suture, I got to do C-sections, I got to suture I mean, it was just incredible. I think that really got me because ultimately what I really like to do is doing things. I like to fix things. I like to use my hands,
yeah,
I like to learn how to do things. And OBGYN, I felt like as I showed interest in wanting to do things, they let me they taught me. And I don't think maybe they're just not used to that of having students, be so engaged and so ready
Mhm.
to go. But I loved it. And afterwards I was like, you know what? Honestly, if not neurosurgery, I could see it based on my experience there. But that's something I never would have said prior to medical school. Prior to my third year of medical school, I never would have said that.
wow.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I asked that question. I would have never expected that.
Yeah, yeah.
You're sharing a little bit about you, right? This is not about your selection, your choices.
Mhm.
I guess the question that I have for you, and this is, I think everybody struggles, and we've talked a little bit about metrics, Ivy Leagues, and research hours. How do you, in this entire process, convey you? Because you are you, right? There's not
Right.
another you. Everybody can have 10,000 hours of research, everybody can come from an Ivy League. But
Right.
I think you were selected because of you. There was something unique about you. How did you navigate that in your application, like to showcase the things that were unique to just you?
Right. I mean, I would say one of the biggest things is the personal statement. It's questionable whether or not the personal statement for some of these residency applications, how much people read it, right? I mean, you'll hear people say, "Oh, just like write whatever, it doesn't matter. They're not going to look at it." But then some people will say, "No, we read it and we look at it and, you can kind of get a flavor for who this person is." I think being genuine in that personal statement really helped me. My personal statement was basically kind of the story that I kind of shared at the beginning, about my first time kind of being in the hospital and kind of why I fell in love with neurosurgery. And additionally, I kind of expanded on it and kind of talked a little bit more about specific things are kind of amazing to me, and like, being in clinic and watching someone be told that they need to have brain surgery is one of the most intimate moments and intimate things you can say to a person. And watching that happen, and I've watched it many, many times, and every single time it's amazing to me. Amazing the amount of trust that that person is about to put in that neurosurgeon, and that was something that really kept me going. And I felt like being very kind of personal and vulnerable about that in the personal statement was really important, because I felt like when you read that, it was like, okay, like this, you can get a little bit more of a feel. It's not just the numbers, it's not just the publications and grades and things like that. And then I would say during the interviews as well, being very, very honest, very open, and just being yourself. And I know, people say that all the time, but at the end of the day, if you've applied to some of these hyper competitive specialties, you're smart. You're smart. You're in medical school, you're smart. You know what you're doing. At the end of the day, they're going to be able to teach you what they want to teach you and get you to be a phenomenal whatever you want to be. Do they want to be around you? Do they feel like you're a person who matches their values? Do they feel like they can have a conversation with you about something that is not neurosurgery and not come away with it thinking this guy's no idea what he's talking about? So yeah, just kind of being vulnerable in those interviews, I think is really valuable. I think it's easy to be guarded. It's easy to kind of lay back on, well, I'm going to talk about my research, I'm going to talk about my grades, I'm going to talk about that. But I really think that's the wrong way to go about it.
I'll ask a fun question, somewhat of a fun
Yeah, yeah,
question. Let's talk about New York a little bit. You're from Florida. You're
yeah,
from like
yes.
not far from where I live here. Very, very different environment where you're
Mhm.
from. And now you're in the city, the greater city.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what it's taught you. And like, are you a New Yorker now? And what has it been like acclimating to so many different cultures and just so much energy? What has it been like?
Yeah. It's very interesting. I mean, there's always stuff going on all the time. And so, you walk around in the city and I mean you can walk past 20 different people who all have 20 different cultures and 20 different things that they're doing. And I mean, it's really one of those things where it can get a little bit overwhelming. And I think when I kind of first came up here, it was a little bit overwhelming, right? I mean, it's like, what am I supposed to eat? There's way too many options, like I'm not used to having this many options. Like this is too much. Like but then you start to kind of realize that, it's a good thing to have all these options, and you should try new things, and you should, meet new people and things like that. I would also say that learning the subway system, learning the train system, and how easy it is to get around now that I know it is very nice. I used to be very intimidated by the subways because I had no idea. And it's like, well, I don't even know where to start. But now I definitely know my way around a bit better. And it's been a fun experience kind of getting to figure all that out. So I would say I'm three-fourths of a New Yorker. I think I'm still
Three
hanging on a
fourths.
little bit, but
Yeah. You have to remain a Floridian for a
yeah,
portion
yeah,
of
yeah.
that because you need
Right.
to escape to the to sit
Exactly, much
in
warmer.
palm trees every now and then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
much warmer.
So what I'm gonna keep with the fun theme. What is the one highlight of your medical school journey now that you're nearing that end? Like what is the one thing that you will always take with you that you would be like, this was the funnest part of med school?
I'm thinking a lot about, like clinical experiences. I'm thinking a lot about, I mean, I love the OR. I really do. Anytime I was in the OR, phenomenal. What any specialty, to be honest with you. I just love it. I will say, and maybe it's an easy one to pick, but match day was pretty incredible. I actually, so a lot of, pretty much all of my friends are matching this year. One of my friends, he was applying cardiothoracic surgery, but he was dual applying cardiothoracic surgery and general surgery. And when you find out, so on the Monday, you get an email from ERAS
Yep.
saying whether or not you matched. But if you dual applied, it doesn't tell you which one. So you still don't really know. I didn't dual apply, so I knew by that then that I had matched. But my friend didn't know if he matched general surgery or cardiothoracic surgery. And I mean, we've been talking about this since we were first year medical students. I mean, he's one of my best friends. We opened up the letters, and he's next to me, and he shows me his letter, and I had to do a double take, and it was like cardiothoracic surgery, same place I'm gonna be. And I was like, that
Oh,
I'm
that's amazing.
so excited. I was almost more excited for him than me. Like I was just
Oh,
ecstatic seeing that, and then just the whole atmosphere of match day. I mean, it's a weird tradition we do. It really is. And you kind of, you talk to people about it, and it's like you open the letters at the same time at noon, and like that's just where you have to go. If you don't go there, you're not being a doctor.
crazy.
Like that's just how it is.
Mm.
It is a crazy tradition, I would say, but it is also incredible. I mean, just being around all these families and everyone. I mean, there's like 400 people stuck in the medical school, and everyone's just freaking out because they've mashed and everything. So it's really phenomenal.
Were you scared? Were you like, I'm so scared, like I don't know where I'm gonna end up?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where honestly, I was more worried about the Monday email. Like that was more what I was worried about because once I
Yeah.
got there, it's like, okay, I'm mashed. I know that every
I'm gonna
place.
be a neurosurgeon.
Exactly, I know that
Yeah.
every place that I interviewed at, I'd be happy to be at. I'd be happy to be at any of these places that I rank. That was really it because if you don't match on that day, then you have to soap. So you have to
So
go through interviews on like the
Yeah.
Tuesday and Wednesday, and then maybe you get a spot, maybe you don't. Maybe you end up doing like a prelim year in like general surgery or something
Mhm.
like that. And I was more nervous for then. And
Mhm.
then once I kind of got there, I tried to just be like, all right, it is what it is. It's going to be what it is. Like I am going to be somewhere. I just don't know where. Being somewhere was more of what I, what I was worried about.
And thank you for reinforcing that because I think in our advising sessions, and Dina can probably attest to this, is again, students think of hyper competitive. I want to go to a top 5 research institutions
Right.
and I'm making my list, and they're all ranked based on prestige, Ivy League, research funding. Am I going to have the opportunity? Graduating from this school means that maybe I become a better doctor. And part of my spiel is like, but at the end of the day, are you going to be happy? And so you selecting programs and knowing that you ranked, you were just happy that you matched because at that point, you're like, I can see myself doing this anywhere and I'm going to be happy and I'm going to make it through. And that's such a big piece that sometimes I think applicants into medicine and for residency miss,
Right.
right? Because you have to be happy. If you're not happy, you're not going to perform. Like that's just the reality. So
Absolutely.
thank you for reinforcing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a good point. I mean, one of the things that I've found is that maybe the most important thing is, yeah, if you're going to be happy there. If you're not going to be happy there, then you might not succeed. And so I think location does matter when you kind of talk about it like that. If you want to be close to your family, if you want to be close to friends, close to whatever, close to a city, not close to a city, I would say that that matters more than the prestige of the institution because every medical school is going to teach you pretty much the same things. It really is. At the end of the day, you're gonna have to take step one, you're gonna have to take step two, and you're gonna have to do research somehow, somewhere. The difference is really the kind of health system that you're attached to, kind of like we talked about a little bit before, and how hard you want it, how hard you want to work. It's kind of up to you. You can succeed anywhere you go. You just have to put in the work. So I think that's a great point.
you bring up such a great point about the health system because I think a lot of students don't think about that, especially
Mm,
when we're making a school list and they have options and they're trying to decide where to go. But it really is so important to be tied to a healthcare system that can that can give you the opportunities that you need. So I'm really happy that you brought that up. And I'm so
or that
proud
you
of you.
don't want,
It's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
or you don't want.
Yeah, yeah.
right?
No, like for us, for example, we have our Hofstra emails, but we also get a Northwell email. So we can email anyone we want within the like the Northwell
The
system,
Northwell
and
system.
it comes in as an internal email for them. We also get access to Teams, so we can Teams anyone we want as well. And that's how I emailed our program director, Dr. Shoulder, is I emailed him with my Northwell email because I found his Northwell email and it was really
Yeah.
easy. That ease of connection, I think, is so important. If there's somewhere that doesn't necessarily have that, I think that's going to be a harder institution to succeed at.
What are you most
Absolutely.
excited about?
Yeah.
What are you most excited about? You're gonna be a
I
neurosurgeon.
I am most excited for when the second year, that's when you are the only resident in the hospital overnight. You are the only neurosurgery resident
Oh,
in the hospital overnight. So you're responsible for emergencies. You're responsible for everything basically that goes on. There's a chief that you can call, you can call in if something goes on. But I am really excited to have that level of responsibility. I really am. Feel like once I get to that point, I hope I feel ready, but even if I don't feel ready, I'm sure that I will be, just to be able to say, okay, I need to call the chief for this, or no, I don't need to call the chief for this. Being confident and just kind of running with it. I can't wait till I have that, because as a medical student, you really don't have many responsibilities, and and as an
yeah.
intern, I'm not gonna have those responsibilities either. So I'm gonna work really hard, but at the end of the day, at some point, the buck has to stop with somebody, and I really hope that I'm gonna do a great job when I finally get that.
You're gonna be what
A
we
lot of responsibility.
right, like you're the adult now, right? As a medical
Yeah,
student, although
right,
you're an adult, but now you're an adult because you're enrolled in
right, yeah,
medical
yeah.
school. As we end our time with you, you've shared your incredible journey, the steps you've taken to be successful in such a competitive specialty. And as you near your time, end your time in medical school and transition to the next phase of your training, maybe can you share what is that one nugget of inspiration that you could share with any pre-health student or medical student that maybe is like, is this for me? Is it not for me? Like, what do I want to do? And again, you're completed half, I would say, right? You're at that next step. What would be that nugget of wisdom that you would want somebody to take away from this entire journey?
Something that I've thought about in the past, two things. First thing is that the impact that you are going to make on people, if you keep going, if you keep trying, you keep putting in the work, the impact that you're going to make on not only your patients but the families of your patients, everyone who knows that patient. I mean, it's infinite, really. The first time you really make an impact in someone's life, whether that's in medical school, or maybe it doesn't happen until residency, or maybe it doesn't happen until you're attending, or you don't feel like it happens, that is what's going to keep you going. That is the goal. That's the kind of light at the end of the tunnel, is when you impact somebody's life, whether it's a small thing, whether it's a big thing. That's it. That's the good stuff. Also, something that kind of pops into my mind sometimes is, at some point, my kids are going to be able to say that their dad's a doctor. And that is just the coolest thing. Even when times get tough, even when I'm sitting there and I'm studying and I don't want to do this anymore, that's what I'm fighting for. Those things are what really, really keep you going, because it is hard. It's not easy. There's a lot of work. It's hard to take care of yourself. It's hard to maintain friendships. It's, hard to see your family, but it is worth it. It is worth it at the end. And there's a way to do it. There is.
Well,
The word
good
of
luck.
the right, the word of the day, impact. Thank
Impact.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
We
Thank
really
you so
appreciate it.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Um,
Thank you guys so much for having me.
yeah,
It's our pleasure.
congratulations. Take some time to decompress because I know you start residency maybe as soon as you graduate, have to figure out, but
Yeah.
good luck.
Thank you.
Can't wait to hear what's coming down the pipeline for you. Exciting
Absolutely.
journey ahead.
We're gonna have to do a follow-up interview.
Of
Okay.
course. I'd love to.
Yes, and just hear what residency is like. But
Yeah.
congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.